And we're going to get started now. Good evening. The time is 5:30 p.m. on December 16th, 2015, and this public meeting of the District of Columbia State Board of Education is now called to order. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum.
Mr. Jacobson.
Present.
Ms. Williams.
Present.
Ms. Lord.
Present.
Ms. Wilson-Phelan.
Present.
Ms. Wattenberg.
Present.
Ms. Anderson.
Present.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones. Mr. Weedon. Mr. Weedon. Ms. Jolly.
Present.
Mr. Contreras.
Present.
Ms. Whittington. Ms. Whittington. Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. A quorum has been determined, and the State Board will now proceed with the business portion of our meeting. Members, we have a draft agenda before us. Are there corrections or additions to the agenda? There being no additions or corrections, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Williams. Is there a second? By Ms. Lord. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved. Next on our agenda is approval of the minutes from the working sessions on December 2nd and December 9th, 2015. Are there additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes en bloc.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Wilson-Phelan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Williams. The motion being properly moved and seconded, I ask for the yeas and nays. All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion is approved. Please let the record note Mr. Weedon from Ward 6 has joined us. Good evening. My name is Jack Jacobson, and I'm the President and Ward 2 representative of the State Board of Education. On behalf of the members of the District of Columbia State Board of Education, I want to welcome you, our guests, and our viewing public to our December 16th, 2015 public meeting. I also want to welcome our State Superintendent of Education, Hansel King. The board holds its regularly scheduled meetings on the third Wednesday of every month here in the old council chambers at 441 4th Street Northwest. The members of the State Board of Education welcome your participation and your support in our efforts to improve education in the nation's capital. Tonight's agenda includes the next step of the board's work to ensure that our students have educational opportunities available to them wherever they are in terms of academic readiness. Our High School Credit Flexibility Task Force, under the chairmanship of Ward 1 member Laura Wilson-Phelan, has completed its work, and we will be considering their recommendations this evening. I want to express my appreciation to the task force members who worked diligently over the past few months to come to consensus on 4 recommendations for the board to consider. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the enormous effort that Ms. Wilson-Phelan put into this initiative on behalf of the board and the significant contributions of our colleagues serving on the task force and our wonderful staff team that resulted in this compelling report. We'll also hear more about the results of last year's PARCC exam for grades 3 through 8. As many know, our results are in line with what we expected. Unfortunately, what we expected is that a majority of our students are not where they should be. We will be working diligently over the next several years to ensure that every student in every part of the District of Columbia is able to succeed, especially with the passage of the Every Student Succeeds Act last week. Before we hear from Superintendent Kang, I want to update members and the public on an item from our November public meeting, the issuance of a state diploma for residents that pass the GED or complete the NEDP. OSSE has published regulations in their proposed form on Friday, December 11th. This opens the public comment period for 30 days. If there are no substantive changes resulting from public comments received, we intend to consider a resolution approving the regulations at our next public meeting on January 20th, 2016. We'll now hear introductory comments from the State Superintendent of Education, Ms. Hansel King.
Good evening, President Jacobson, members, and viewing members of the public. I am glad to be here this evening and look forward to sharing an update on the grades 3 to 8 results from the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Career, or PARCC exam. I also want to express my appreciation of our work with the board on both the state diploma and the credit flexibility matters that are before us. And in particular, I'm excited to hear the discussion about the Credit Flexibility Task Force's report. We look forward at OSSI to reviewing the recommendations from the task force and moving quickly to produce regulations that can go out for public comment. So we are looking forward to the discussion. And with that, I'll leave it.
Thank you, Superintendent Kang. We're now going to move to the public comment period of our agenda. The board welcomes public participation in activities under its authority. At every public meeting, we begin with testimony from public witnesses on education-related matters. If you are a member of the public and would like to speak at a public meeting, please contact our staff at SBOE@dc.gov or by calling 202-741-0888. Our public witnesses include Sally Schwartz with Globalize DC, Aniqua McNeil, also with Globalize DC, and you can come down and take seats at the witness table, please. Ms. Merilyn Holmes, Executive Director, Total Sunshine, Inc., Mr. Eric Martell, a member of the public and former DCPS teacher, and Mr. Robert Pullman, a member of the public. We appreciate you taking the time to come down this evening. Let's start with Ms. Schwartz and move down the line. Make sure the green light is lit on the microphone, and you will have 3 minutes each, and I believe you've submitted written testimony, perhaps in longer version for us, so please begin.
Thank you. You hear me? Thank you for this opportunity.
Can you pull the microphone much closer to your mouth, please? Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to testify this evening, and thank you also for the tremendous work of the Task Force on Credit Flexibility. My name is Sally Schwartz. I'm Director of Globalize DC, which is a nonprofit organization that works to increase access for DC public school students to high-quality global education and language learning opportunities. And I'm here to speak specifically on credit flexibility for world languages. And I'm joined by a former participant of one of our programs, and you may have seen her in our film Beyond the Wall, Aniqua McNeil. Students who can communicate in more than one language, particularly those with proficiency in critical languages, are an increasing demand by U.S. employers. In DC, employees with language skills are needed in federal and local government, in business, health, tourism, the nonprofit sector. As a city, we have been very slow to recognize the value of language skills in today's economy and the need to create strong language programs that will prepare our young people to fill these 21st century jobs. But here's the opportunity. DC is uniquely rich in language resources that we could potentially leverage to benefit our students. But right now, we are bumping up against the rigidity of an old system that only grants credit for language teaching within a school classroom. This is particularly problematic when language programs are so inequitably distributed across the city. So we want DC to create a more rational, flexible system that will allow options for our students to pursue their own academic interests and career goals. We see the state board's proposal to adopt credit flexibility for world languages as a very important forward-looking strategy that can help us build our K-12 language capacity and respond more nimbly both to student and parent demand and to high-quality language opportunities. It will allow students to earn credit for alternative, often more authentic language programs. It can open the door to credible educational organizations with language resources not currently available to our students to develop programs and strategies that increase access. And this will be most helpful to students in schools with the most limited language options. This said, and I see my time running out, we are concerned about the language in the proposal or the resolution that I've seen that talks about credit for demonstrated prior knowledge. We want to be sure this important policy can be applied to future or ongoing learning in order to expand access to high-quality language opportunities, not just as a means to reward past learning or to allow students to test out of their language requirement. We think this is important as you go forward with planning and implementation, and you might consider the option of dropping that term prior and just talk about giving credit for demonstrated knowledge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Schwartz. Ms. McNeil?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Is that better?
that's wonderful. Thank you.
My name is Anikul McNeil. I'm a former DCPS student. I attended Anacostia High School as well as McKinley Technology High School. I attended McKinley Technology High School when I was in 9th grade, and I was kicked out due to poor behavior. I was forced to go to my neighborhood school, Anacostia Senior High School. In 2008, when I was in 10th grade, I was actually granted the opportunity to go to a free study abroad program to China through a program called American Study Abroad, which is a nonprofit organization. After completing this free summer program, I wanted to continue my Chinese, but at the time, it was Chinese language learning in DC was very limited. So after school, I traveled from Southeast to Wilson High School twice a week, and then after those classes ended, I took classes at the graduate school with professionals who were trying to advance in their career at 17. I was really determined to keep up with my language, but it wasn't available for me. And during the day, I had to actually continue to take Spanish just to graduate from school. Sorry. I just want to talk about, I'm here to speak about if students like myself were offered the opportunity to take a language outside of school and gain high school credits, the opportunity for these students are endless. The credit flexibility could lead to creating high school students who are ready for the workforce and able to compete on a global level. This opportunity has the possibility to reach students all over DC, no matter what school, ward, or socioeconomic background. Specifically, students east of the river could benefit from this the most, an area where language learning outside of French and Spanish does not exist. Through my experiences as a person who has learned a language and been able to travel around the world, this has really benefited me in my life. And if this credit flexibility was around in high school, it could have freed up my time as a learner, and I could have maybe took a semester abroad. And I just hope today that you take this speech and is really moved by what I have to say.
Well, I was. Thank you. We appreciate you taking time out of your evening to come down, and thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you.
Ms. Holmes?
Yes. Good evening. Happy holidays. It's always a pleasure for me to come here and share with you all the work that Total Sunshine Inc. is doing in the community and also with the young people of the city. I'm Merilyn Holmes, president of Total Sunshine Inc. We're a local 501c3 nonprofit, and we've been working with the young people in the city for the last 15 years. It's been quite a task, but I'm still determined to get done the things that need to get done for the young people in the city as much as I can help. I'm willing to do that. I wanted to share with you all the invitation that we have open for all DC public students and basically for every student and every person. It's the 2016 Martin Luther King Peace Walk and Parade. It's coming up January 18th, 2016. It's going to be along Martin Luther King Avenue in Southeast. This is a community service opportunity for every student in the city. They can feel free to come out and participate. They can feel free to come out and assist. They can even come to the planning meetings. The next planning meeting is going to be at the Ride Center on the St. Elizabeth's campus, 10 o'clock in the morning this Saturday, December 19th. It's always an exciting time. Total Sunshine, the corporation as well as myself. I always go out and do some chanting and do some filming for the TV show, and we have a wonderful time. And so I'm hopeful that all the students of the city will feel free to come on out and basically have a good time with us and support the legacy of Martin Luther King. There's also an essay contest for youth. MLKHolidayDC.org is the website. From what I hear, they are it's going to be should be fantastic. It's grades 5 through 8. The deadline is January 4th. It's 300-plus words, and the topic of that is, how can I make a change? The theme for the Peace Walk and Parade this upcoming January is Change is Coming. And so we invite all the young people nationwide to submit essays. All of the information, again, is on mlkholidaydc.org. And I know Total Sunshine, we have actually went on ahead and said we're going to hopefully support some young people with some tech tools, some of the winners. And it's always a wonderful thing. It's always so exciting. Let's see, was there anything else? I'm sure that I should probably say something about our annual school grade reward ceremony. June 2016, we're going to gather all the valedictorians and salutatorians of the city once again, and we're going to be looking to support them with tech tools for their college futures. And so we're hopeful that we're going to have a lot of support. This is a part of our school grade incentive program, and if people would like more information about that, they can go to totalsunshine.org. Always out here in the community. If I'm not working medically as a paramedic, then I'm medicing to the society, and I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in the new year. I hope you all have a happy holiday.
Thank you so much, Ms. Holmes. Mr. Pullman.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Robert Pullman, and I'm a resident of Ward 1 in the District of Columbia. I've been active in D.C. affairs for the past 40 years, involved mostly in matters of finance and affordable housing. Those who see the struggle we have in the district in providing affordable housing have begun to emphasize not just lowering the cost of housing, but also raising the incomes of those who cannot afford it. Getting a good job, of course, is key to earning enough to afford housing, and a good education is the key to getting those jobs. Too many of our residents can't qualify for jobs that pay enough to live on. A major factor in that outcome is that in some wards of the city, according to a 2007 study, roughly 50% of the population over the age of 16 is not functionally literate. And a 2014 study by Appleseed found that 60,000 D.C. adult residents lack a high school diploma. Even now, after improvements in our schools, nearly 34% of third grade students scored at level 1 in the recent PARCC exam, not even partially meeting expectations in language arts. The Annie E. Casey Foundation, in a 2012 report entitled Double Jeopardy: How Third Grade Reading Skills and Poverty Influence High School Graduation, found in a longitudinal study of 4,000 students from across the country that those who did not read proficiently by third grade are 4 times more likely to not graduate from high school. Those who could not read at even the basic level by third grade were 6 times more likely to not graduate from high school. The report found that children with the lowest tier reading scores in third grade account for 63% of all children who do not graduate from high school. Knowing this, there should be a more compelling sense of urgency focused on the percentage of students performing at PARCC levels 1 and 2 in English language arts who have not yet even approached expectations at performance level 3. There's common agreement that students read to learn beginning in 4th grade, yet we see test scores in a number of our schools where more than 70% of students in 3rd and 4th grade are performing at levels 1 and 2. This means we're failing to provide a large percentage of our students with the most foundational education needed for them to succeed in school. Going forward, I would urge the board to take a leadership role in advocating for funding for a specific initiative to ensure that every student is able to read at grade level by the end of 3rd grade. This would not, in and of itself, address every challenge facing our school system, but it would most certainly provide a firm foundation for doing so. Thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you all for your testimony tonight. If you have any additional written materials, please feel free to email us or drop them with our staff, and enjoy your holidays.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to move on to our PARCC update. The Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers, or PARCC, was formed by states with the purpose of crafting new assessments to replace state-specific standardized tests. The assessment has 2 purposes. First, to give a clear and understandable evaluation of a student's progress, and second, to give reliable information that pinpoints where a student needs additional assistance. We have seen the citywide results for the high school exam and the results for grades 3 through 8. Superintendent Kang, I'd like to turn it over to you now and ask you to provide members of the public and the board some of the information we've learned from the first year of PARCC.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share these results and the additional background on the new assessment that we've implemented. If you can go to the next slide. Some basic background on PARCC. So DC students and students in 11 other states took the PARCC assessment in the 2014-15 school year, and you can see the other states listed there. The required assessments during the 14-15 school year were for English language arts/literacy and math in grades 3 to 8, and the English 2 and geometry integrated math 2 assessments in high school. As President Jacobson noted, we previously have shared the high school results, both publicly and with the board, and today are focused on the results for grades 3 to 8. In this presentation, OSSE is releasing the statewide results, which include the results for DCPS students and students in public charter schools. So the main reason why we looked to a new assessment is that we saw that across the country and in DC, too many of our students were actually succeeding in high school, graduating from high school, getting to post-secondary education, but then struggling in that first year of coursework. So I think often in our discussions, we've been focused on those students who have struggled even at the high school levels and below. But here we are seeing that even our students who have succeeded in high school and reached post-secondary may struggle in that first year of coursework. And that led us to believe that we need to do something differently in the pre-K to 12 education system to better prepare our students and ensure they have a better sense of their readiness for post-secondary. And so we believe that PARCC, unlike older state assessments, presents a fuller and more authentic picture of student learning. And so as an example, we've shared these 4th grade math questions. On the previous DC CAS question, you can see that this is a relatively basic word problem about adding and subtracting fractions. And the PARCC problem is actually the same underlying skill of needing to know how to add and subtract fractions, but it asks students to actually look at another student's work to add these mixed numbers and to identify the errors they see in the work and explain them. You can see in the middle step of the problem that this other student had added both the numerator and the denominator when you should keep the denominator consistent, and so that led to an error. And so in the PARCC example, the student needs to identify and explain the error as well as find the correct solution to the problem. And so you can see, even though it's the same basic underlying skill, it requires a different depth of thinking and understanding of the concept to be able to correctly solve the PARCC problem. One of the differences between the PARCC assessment and the previous DC CAS is that there are 5 performance levels on PARCC. Level 1 means did not yet meet expectations. Level 2, partially met expectations. Level 3, approached expectations. Level 4, met expectations. And level 5, exceeded expectations. And levels 4 and 5 indicate that the student is on track for college and career readiness. When we look at how PARCC was administered in DC, 92% of our students took the PARCC assessment online last spring, outpacing most other states. And listed here are the numbers of students who took the assessment in each grade for ELA and for math. What we see is that in 7th and 8th grade math, the numbers of students are lower, and that is because there are some students, you can flip to the next one, who took the Algebra 1 and geometry assessments rather than the 7th grade math test or 8th grade math test. And so students in 7th and 8th grade who were taking the Algebra 1 or geometry courses took the assessments for those courses rather than the grade level math test. In terms of the takeaways we see in our 3 to 8 results, we see overall promising results at lower grades that give us signs of optimism. We also see our advanced students doing very well on the advanced math tests. But we know that overall we have much more work to do, both in the overall results and the results for particular groups of students. And yet, because of the signs of optimism and because of what we've seen on DC CAS, we have confidence that our results will get better over time. So when we look at the aggregated results for grades 3 to 8, what we see is that in this first year of the new assessment, 25% of our students in grades 3 to 8 were on track for college and career readiness in ELA, and 24% of our students were on track for college and career readiness in grades 3 to 8 math. So I'll now walk through the ELA results in more detail. And so this slide shows the specific percentage of students who scored at levels 4 and 5 who met or exceeded expectations on each grade level's ELA test. And what you see is that the levels of students who are meeting this bar are relatively consistent across these tests in ELA. We'll see a slightly different picture when we get to math. This slide shows the results for students at each performance level in each grade, starting with level 1 in the bottom box up through level 5 in the top set of numbers. And so what we see is, again, relatively consistent percentages of students in each grade, with the exception of 3rd grade and 7th and 8th grade, where we see slightly higher percentages of students in the level 1 category. This next slide shows the 3-day ELA results by race and ethnicity. The leftmost slide shows the results for all students, which we've been seeing in the previous slides. The results then in the 3 right columns show the results for Black, Hispanic, and white students. And we see, similarly to our high school results, we see a significant difference between our Black and Hispanic students who are on track for college and career readiness, 17% and 21% respectively, as compared with our white students, of whom 79% are on track for college and career readiness. At the bottom of the slide, you can see the number of students and the percentage of students in each of the racial ethnic categories among the 3 to 8 test takers. This next slide shows the 3-day ELA results by special population. And again, much like our high school results, we see significant and troubling gaps that exist for students in particular groups. In particular, we see that 4% of our students in special education were on track for college and career readiness, 12% of our English language learners, 14% of our economically disadvantaged students, and 10% of our at-risk students. However, although these results show us that we have much, much more work to do, we do have some optimism because we have larger numbers of students who are exceeding, meeting, or approaching expectations in earlier grades in those levels 3, 4, and 5 categories in grades 3 to 8 as compared with our high school results. We also see fewer students in that level 1 category who are the furthest from meeting expectations, and so we are optimistic that our results will continue to improve over time. I will now walk through the 3-8 math results in more detail. On this slide, you can see the percentage of students scoring at levels 4 and 5 on each of the math assessments. And so you can see that in contrast with the ELA assessments, we actually see higher proportions of students scoring at 4 and 5, meeting or exceeding expectations in the earlier grades, in grades 3 and 4. You can actually flip to the next slide. This slide now shows the results by grade, and so it includes in the shaded areas those 7th and 8th graders who took the advanced math tests. And so again, you see that there are higher percentages of students scoring at 4 and 5 in the lower grades, in 3rd and 4th grade. And that in particular gives us a sense that our students at the earliest grades were the most prepared for this new style of math, having to demonstrate their math knowledge and skill in a different way. And so we believe that greater level of preparation in the early grades will continue to carry forward over time. This slide then shows the level of students at the percentage of students at each performance level for each assessment in math in grades 3 to 8, as well as for Algebra 1 and Geometry. Next one. This slide shows the results by race and ethnicity, and so again, we see a significant difference between the percentage of our Black and Hispanic students who are on track for college and career readiness in grades 3 to 8 math as compared with our white students. And again, there were 3-8 results for math by special population, and again, quite similar results to what we saw in ELA and in high school. I should note that in particular, I think we find all of these gaps to be very troubling, but the low results for our students in special education in the single digits for both ELA and math are particularly troubling, and are one area of focus in some additional analysis that we're planning to conduct. We again see a far greater percentage of students who are approaching, meeting, and exceeding expectations in grades 3 to 8 as compared with high school. In particular, we see a far greater percentage of students who are already on track for college and career readiness in the lower grades as compared with high school. And so having half our students already in those top 3 categories as compared with a third in the high school levels gives us great confidence that we will continue to see these results improve over time. This slide just looks into the advanced math assessments at a slightly greater level of detail, and we see in particular that those students who are essentially 2 years ahead of a high school math track, so who are taking Algebra 1 in 7th grade and Geometry in 8th grade, are particularly far ahead of what we saw in the other math assessments. The 8th grade Algebra 1 test takers who are 1 year ahead, their results are relatively similar to what we saw in the 7th and 8th grade math tests. And so again, just reiterating the takeaways that we saw, overall we know that we have much more work to do, but we do have signs of optimism that give us confidence that these results will improve over time. Some quick notes about some of the important supports that are already in place. DC is unique and is taking some particularly important steps with at-risk funding already in place to support our most vulnerable students, early and effective implementation of the Common Core state standards. We have universal access to pre-kindergarten, and most importantly, the ongoing work of our local education agencies and schools to support our students. We also have some interesting pilot programs and new initiatives at the state level, but again, much more work happening at the local level that we believe will lead to improved results over time. New supports for families and educators. We want to highlight this page on our website, aussie.dc.gov/parc, where we have a video and other resources for families, educators, and schools to better understand the PARCC score reports, as well as templates and parent guides that are translated into multiple languages. We also have a link there to PARCC-provided resources, including extensive released test items with student work samples that show a really good picture of the level of expectation on the PARCC assessment, as well as student work at each level, showing educators exactly what it looks like to score at the different levels. We also this week are, you can go to the next slide. We also this week are actually have been mailing to schools the individual student score reports for individual students who took the PARCC assessment last year. These results are, again, have been mailed by OSSI to schools, and so schools should be sending them home to families either this week or after the holiday break. We will also be launching public access to an interactive platform where the public can see these results in a more visual way, and are also have options for educators to see the reports in a more visual way as well. And currently already on OSSI's website, you can see this same presentation as well as student level, or I apologize, school level results. Coming in 2016, we will create additional options for educators, and also we have the next year of PARCC assessment starting up from the end of March through May, and the results from the second year of PARCC assessments will be available in summer 2016. The fact that the results came back this year in the fall and early winter was just the result of the transition to a new assessment system. In the first year of new assessments, it takes a little bit more time to set the performance levels, but going forward, the results will be coming back in the summer, more on a regular timeline. So that's it for my presentation. You can see additional detail and results again on our website at aussie.dc.gov/parc.
Thank you, Superintendent Kang. I wonder if you'd mind taking questions from board members?
Absolutely.
I'd like to offer the beginning to Ms. Wattenberg from Ward 3, who actually sat in on some of the PARCC Consortium's work over the summertime. Ms. Wattenberg.
How did you know I had a question? But I do. So going to the slide that shows the math scores, let's see. By grade. It's page 11. It's slide 11, I guess. I did want math, so you are right, I'm on the wrong one. Math came, yep. Yeah. I then want to go to ELA, but, okay. So it's 18, actually, is what I wanted to look at. So here is my question. So looking at the 8th graders, 37% of them are at level 1 in math, 28% are at level 2 in math, and we require kids to enter Algebra 1 in 9th grade. And my question is, do we have any way of knowing at what level these students would be ready to be successful in Algebra 1?
Sorry. So one clarification is, I think you had said this, but just for those who are listening, the column here that says 8th grade, this is for those students who took the 8th grade math test. So there were some 8th graders who took the Algebra 1 and geometry tests, and those students would be included in those columns. This is just for the 8th graders who took the 8th grade math test. So yes, out of those 8th graders who took the 8th grade math test, you're correct that 37% were in level 1, 28% in level 2. I don't think we know exactly what level. PARCC does not indicate, and OSSE does not indicate a level that's required in order to take Algebra 1 in the following year. But I think that there are some schools who are optionally choosing to administer the Algebra 1 assessment. I'm trying to think if we have any information. I don't think that there's a particular level that we would require.
No,
Or that indicates
what I
readiness.
mean, though, is what's the likelihood that a student, an 8th grader in level 1, would be able to be successful taking Algebra 1 in 9th grade?
And I don't know that we have a particular answer for
So
that.
I wonder if we could talk to PARCC, and if they have some way, I mean, because they've got their test specs and their blueprint, I wonder if there's a way to go in there and get a sense of what level would make sense to have as you enter Algebra 1.
Sure.
That'd be a great thing to know.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think my instinct is that likely we would need another year of results so that we could see how students who took the 8th grade PARCC test and scored at the different levels then did the following year on the PARCC Algebra 1 test, since we wouldn't have that year-to-year information just from 1 year of test data. But we don't necessarily, we have only a few schools that chose to give Algebra 1 in DC, since it wasn't our required high school math test, but we could look at whether we could get some of that information from other PARCC states.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking more just in the sense that we could look at what competencies students had and didn't have, what they had mastered and hadn't mastered if they were 1s and 2s. And that could tell us something about their readiness for the algebra, which I think we could do before next year. I see what you're saying about with next year we would have a different kind of evidence as well. So I think that would be very useful to have.
I think it's a good question also for our schools and LEAs to look at. So within the overall math score, there are a number of different areas within subcategories about sort of different parts of the math test. And we have at this point shared with schools files that show students' scores on those subcategories as well as their overall score. So my guess is that, although I wasn't a high school math educator myself, my guess is that there are some parts of math that are particularly foundational for succeeding in Algebra 1 as compared with other areas. And so some schools may see students doing particularly well on some areas, and in other places, even if they have the same overall performance level, that they may have performed differently on subcategories, and that may say something about readiness as well.
All right. Can I do a second question?
You have 1 minute.
So going to ELA, the equivalent slide, which is 13. I'm sorry, not 13. It's 11. So you had indicated that the third grade is lower than the other grades. And do we have any information as to whether that's true in other states? And I guess the other thing is also true, which is in math, the 3rd and 4th graders were higher
That's
than
right.
the later grades. And to what extent do we know that that's a pattern that's appearing across the country, or it's specific to DC?
Yeah, so just to clarify my comment on the 3rd grade ELA results, you'll see that the percentage of students who are on track for college and career readiness is actually quite consistent in 3rd grade as the other grades. There's a slightly greater percentage of students in the level 1 category in 3rd grade as compared with the other grades. And so in terms of the consistency of our math and ELA results, I don't think we totally know yet. We're still, because states release their information in such different ways, we haven't necessarily seen everything in a consistent format quite yet. But I do think that our 3rd and 4th grade results seem at first glance, based on the limited information we have, to be quite promising as relative to other states in math.
I hope they are, but it would be good to know so that we know it's not
Absolutely.
just something in the test.
Yep, absolutely.
I have another question for another round, if there is another round. But
Thank you. Ms. Wilson-Phelan.
Thank you. I had a similar question on the same slide, so we can stay there. And one thing that was surprising to me is actually the number in level 1 in grade 3. So if we think about the trajectory of the reform efforts in Washington, D.C., I would have expected the grade 3 students to be knocking it out of the park if we think that what we're doing is effective. So I'm curious about any reflections you all have had on that.
I don't think we totally know enough yet to really say. I mean, one thing I'll just note is that, across the country, we see that often math results move more quickly than ELA results do. So that may be one reason why we're seeing some of those promising signs in the 3rd and 4th grade math results and not seeing those same signs on the ELA side. But I think, I don't think we can know for sure yet. I will note that one of the pilot projects that we flagged that are happening at the state level is an early literacy grant working with a couple of organizations that partner with schools to support early literacy efforts.
Thanks. And this might seem like an odd question, but partly in reflection to Mr. Pullman's testimony, I'm curious about how the term college and career ready compares with what we might call on grade level.
I don't think there's a sort of specific correlation. I think that, I'm not sure that there's a specific correlation. Yeah. I think that, part of what is different about the PARCC assessment and thinking about sort of what our expectations are for students at each of these grades is that I think it is a different definition of what we expected in 3rd grade than what we expected in 3rd grade previously on DC-CAS, right? And the reason for that is when we think about the endpoint was designed with a different endpoint in mind. I think our previous assessments were sort of designed towards what do we think high school success looks like? What do you need to know to graduate from high school? And I think with the PARCC assessment, it was really designed in partnership with higher education faculty, starting with sort of what do you need to know to be successful in that first year of post-secondary, and then working backwards from there. And I think that different, starting with that outcome in mind, led to a different sort of expectation of what we expected at each of the grade levels.
And ELA is a huge category, as you know, representing macro language proficiency, I guess. But do you know yet about the breakdown and where the opportunity areas are for our students? So for example, if we were just to take literacy, and I know that DCPS in particular tracks literacy both in fluency and in phonetics apart from this exam, and the results seem to be really promising across the city, where we're seeing many more schools in the 60 percentile in terms of students being on grade level for literacy and comprehension and fluency. How do you, in your mind or in the analysis and the discussions you might have had, how do those all come together as we review these scores? Where are we seeing the biggest needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have not had a chance yet to do the statewide analysis at the subcategory level, but I will flag that the ELA exam includes both English language arts. The English language arts / literacy term includes the kinds of subjects that were included on the DC-CAS English, but also the DC-CAS composition. So it's not just the different elements of literacy, but also writing in particular. And so anecdotally, I would say that what I've heard educators talk about is the two things that are newest are, one, a greater focus on nonfiction text as opposed to literary text, as well as the greater emphasis on writing and writing based on text. So not just narrative writing, but writing based on real texts.
Thank you.
Ms. Anderson or Ms. Lord? Ms. Lord?
Thank you. I'm going to sort of start by acknowledging that this first round of PARCC assessments also comes with a significant shift in how our state education agency is planning to work with schools to improve them. And I think it marks a significant enough change that I would hope, could you speak a little bit about changing from the identification and sort of punishment to systems of support, which is now going to be the sort of the norm. But in that context, help me understand how the system of support will address the glaring and, I think, totally inexcusable gap between the vast majority of students who are scoring below proficiency levels and the handful of mostly affluent or Caucasian students who are scoring at the 4 and 5 level. Because it seems to me there's a huge opportunity to figure out how to align our curriculum so that we don't have the 60 or so percent or 75% of students entering ninth grade clearly, demonstrably not prepared to be on college and career track. So it seems like we have to realign what we consider a K-12 system in order to accommodate the learning needs of our students, as opposed to this is the structure we have. So help me understand how the systems of support will, help buoy the 4% of special ed kids or the 14% of seventh grade students who are proficient in math, while accelerating everybody else.
Yes, I'll do my best. These are big questions. So I think a couple of comments there. So one thing I think that I just want to make sure everyone understands is just that these assessments, these results, as troubling as they are, do not mean that our students learned less or know less than they'd had previously on the DC CAS when the results look different. This is a different way of looking at the results and a look that gives us more information earlier than we previously had. So previously we saw DC CAS results that looked higher than the numbers we are looking at, and yet we saw that so many of our students, when they got to post-secondary, were still struggling. We saw very high numbers of them going into remedial coursework at a point when they were already past their pre-K to 12 careers and were having to spend money and time and resources in those remedial classes at the post-secondary level, learning content that frankly they ideally would have learned in the high school and middle school and elementary school settings. And so I think I just want to say that this doesn't mean that we are doing worse than we were before or that our students know less than we were before. And on indicators that have been consistent over time, such as the NAEP assessment, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, we see that DC has been making tremendous progress over time. These results also don't negate that. I think it's clear to me, and I think to most people, that had we asked our students to take the PARCC assessment 5 years ago or 10 years ago, the results would have been even more troubling than the ones we are seeing today. So this doesn't in any way invalidate the progress that has been made. And I say that also because I think that shows that much of what we are doing is on the right track, and some of it may take more time. That's not to say we are doing everything right or that these results are not troubling and that there's not more we need to do, that we all need to operate with an even greater sense of urgency. But just that I think it would be a mistake to think we should stop doing everything we've been doing or do everything completely differently, because I think we have been seeing that progress continue. I think in terms of the state level work, I think we are, as I mentioned, I think in particular focusing on those outcomes for our students in special education. I think for such a long time our focus in DC has been on improving our compliance and the basic level of service we provide, and those are important. That's important work, obviously, and we still have some strides to do in that area. But I think really having made a lot of progress on the compliance front, we want to really shift to the outcomes for students in special education, including addressing these results that we're seeing on the PARCC assessment. We're also starting to work with our education partners in thinking about greater support for our English language learners, who are a growing segment of our population in DC. And then just across the board, I think it will take ongoing partnership between OSSE as the state education agency, our LEAs, and our schools to look at sort of who is really making promising progress in these areas and what we can learn from them that we may not have thought of yet, or how we can see even more promising pilot initiatives that we can continue to learn from over time.
Mr. Weedon.
Thank you for coming and going through the results again with us. I think the board, each individual board member and the board as an entity shares the concern about the gap, whether it's race, economics, special needs, whatever that is. Now, I do want to push back a little bit on the tremendous progress that we've seen on the NAEP. We have seen growth, we've seen progress, but those same gaps have not closed in the NAEP since 2001, 2002. Whether you're looking at the 4th grade reading, the 8th grade math, the special populations, the TUDA, the Trial Urban District results, those gaps have not shrunk. We need to do more, and we need to evaluate what we're doing. I want to ask you and reiterate for the record a couple of things that my constituents have asked and I've asked previously. We talk a lot about promising results in early grades, and if there's a lot of rhetoric about that being tied to participation in the district's very robust early ed program. I'd love to see actual data on that. Are the students who are enrolled in the early ed programs actually testing better? I think they will be, but let's get the actual data. Student mobility is another issue that has come up frequently. Are students that are staying in one school testing better? Or do we see drops as they move around, transferring across schools, across our school districts, across from public to public charter? And I would add attendance as another issue. Can we tie attendance to test scores? I think we know what the results would be, but I bet that's something that we can use to advocate and really demonstrate to the public why attending school matters. And then my question, you've talked a little bit about early literacy investments and working with partners, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago at our board meeting. What about math? What are we doing to improve math scores in the district? There are a number of schools where we have single digits or 0 students who meet the college and career ready in math. What are we doing?
Yes. So I think the first part of your question was about early education, and then I should have been taking notes throughout, so you might need to remind me in the middle. But on the early education piece, I think one thing that's interesting is that for our 3rd and 4th grade students, because they benefited from universal pre-kindergarten, there's not actually a comparison group there. So the analysis we've been thinking of doing is looking at those students who are enrolled in both pre-K 3 and 4 versus those students who were just enrolled in pre-K 4. But that is very high on our list of additional analysis that we're hoping to do to get a better sense of the results. And to be clear, I think we are not able to attribute, the results that we're seeing to any one initiative, and it's speculative at this time. But I think the two things that we really saw jump out in DC as compared with other places are the universal access to pre-K as well as the early and aggressive implementation of Common Core state standards, but appreciate the push to look at more. And then the last question you had asked was about what we're doing in math as compared with, in addition to early literacy. And I think that's right, that to push on. I was I've been visiting schools and LEAs around the district, and I was recently at LC Whitlow Stokes, where they've adopted a particular math curriculum that really focuses on foundational concepts and a really strong understanding of number sense. And I was really impressed by sort of what I saw their students grappling with and the ways in which I could see that aiming for problem-solving skills and their conceptual understanding of just numbers and what numbers can do and how to manipulate them, how I could see that leading up in later years to sort of the kinds of thinking you need to be able to do on the high school math assessments in PARCC. So I think we want to continue to look at, again, those schools that are doing those promising results. Their math curriculum, I actually can't remember the name of it, but I had never heard of it before. And so I think it would be trying to look at sort of those places that have gotten really strong outcomes, seeing what they attribute that to, and trying to spread those practices. And again, we want to do that not only across DC schools and LEAs, but other PARCC states as well, and learn from the work that they're doing. Can you remind me of the middle 2 questions you had?
I asked about student mobility and attendance.
Yep, and with mobility and attendance, again, I don't think we know the answers yet, but I think those are good questions to look into for our ongoing analysis.
Did any other board members want another first-round question? Then I have a couple regarding English language learners. And you touched lightly on this in your response to Ms. Lord, but I've noted that only 12% of English language learning students in grades 3 through 8 are on track for career and college readiness in English language arts. For 10th graders, that number is even lower, only 5%. The PARA report indicated that there was, quote, little evidence that DC has focused systemically on this group's needs, end quote, and that ELL student proficiency rates actually declined from 2009 to 2014. What's the explanation for this, and how can OSSI work with LEAs to bring greater focus to the needs of our ELL students?
I'm not sure of why the proficiency rates declined. I do know the percentage of our students who are English language learners has been growing over time, but I'm not sure sort of what's driving the decline in proficiency rates. I do think that there has not always been as much of a focus on our English language learner students as there could be going forward, and obviously there's a much greater need for support here. I think we are starting to work with, we had even this summer started to convene our education partners, including LEAs, including the Public Charter School Board and DCPS, in discussing how we can better support our English language learner students. And while those discussions are in pretty early stages, we think it was an important step to continue to start that conversation even prior to these results coming out. We're also part of another consortium of states called WIDA, which actually doesn't stand for anything, it's just the acronym that they use, which is a group of states that's come together around the English language proficiency test, which is separate from sort of the standards-based test that PARCC represents, and using this new test called Access for ELLs to measure sort of language proficiency and readiness to take even assessments like this one. And being part of that consortium means we can learn from other states' approaches in their support for English language learner students particularly. So I think we're at those early stages of investigating what other states are doing. We're also, again, trying to learn from other states in the PARCC consortium as well. So New Mexico, for example, has a very large percentage of English language learner students. Other states like Colorado, Massachusetts are seeing growing percentages of students in those categories, so we want to learn from what they're doing also.
You hit on something that I'd like you to expand on, or at least like to investigate a little bit. You said that the number of ELL students in the district is growing. Has funding and professional staff to support those students in particular, has that grown at the same rate that the number of students has grown?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do want to note that the at-risk funding, which is a commitment that the district has made to support students of particular need, includes English language learner students as well as students in special education and a number of other categories.
And I think that will get into my next question, or that answer will relate to my next and final question. What are some of the strategies that OSSE and or LEAs have put into place to improve the supports and services offered to English language learners?
So again, I think we are still sort of in the planning stages of convening people to figure out what some of those strategies might be, but I think it is an area of focus for us. There is a part of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act that I believe is still there with the newest reauthorization called Title III, which is focused specifically on English language learner support. So we want to really think about how we're using this Title III funds and how we can support LEAs in using them to support our English language learner students.
Thank you. I'd be very interested to see how that progress proceeds. Thank you. And Ms. Wattenberg, I think you had another question. Ms. Anderson.
Well, I think this is something that I think a couple of the other questions have been kind of trying to get at. But, when I look at test score results, I think perspective has a lot to do with how you view these things. And the PARCC scores tell us a lot about what students are doing. But what they don't tell us, and what I think a lot of parents and a lot of board members of people who are working in the schools are trying to find out, what does it tell us about what teachers are doing? And what does it tell us about what kinds of strategies and what are the kinds of things that need to be done to get, to present a different picture of achievement in the system. So what does it tell us? What are these scores telling us about what teachers need to do? And I think that's some of the things that the other questions have been getting at. But I want to kind of take the focus, when I look at the PARCC scores, when I look at the other testing scores, I want to kind of take the focus off of what the students are doing, because the students do and the students perform at a level that reflects the teaching that they receive. Mm-hmm. So I'm not casting judgment necessarily, but I'm just saying I think the PARCC scores, to me, paint a far more dismal picture about what actually is going on in the classrooms than it does about what students are doing.
So I do think that we are in the midst of a shift in instruction that is it's a pretty significant shift. And again, I think it's in line with sort of seeing that even students who had been doing well on the previous assessments were struggling when they got to college. And when we stepped back and thought about what that meant, we said to ourselves, sort of, what does it really take to succeed in college that wasn't being captured on these previous assessments? And I think to your point, those are sort of the shifts that are guiding our educators in thinking differently about instruction as well. So I've hinted at a few of them in my remarks, but I think in particular we saw that in college, previously in K-12 education, much of the reading that we did was literary texts, novels, and works of fiction. And what we saw is that while that's important, absolutely, in post-secondary education, a lot more, and in careers, a lot more of the reading that you do is nonfiction, non-literary text. And so building students' skill in literacy in science, social studies, and technical subjects was really important. And there's a renewed emphasis on that in the Common Core state standards and on the PARCC assessment. Another significant shift we saw was being able to write, not only write generally and in a narrative fashion, but write based on text. So being able to read a text, another text, compare and contrast the ideas, and cite evidence from those texts in supporting a point that you are making. And that level of being able to teach that kind of writing is a skill for our teachers as well as a skill for our students to learn. And then in math, again, I think there's been, for much too long in the United States, our math education is really focused on rote memorization and learning a procedure, learning steps to solving a particular type of problem, instead of understanding deeply the underlying concepts and having the number sense to be able to tackle a problem, even if you haven't learned the exact steps to do it. And these are all really big shifts in instruction that we're starting to see in our classrooms, but they take time. It's a different way of teaching for our teachers. And one just resource that I'd point people to, again, both parents and teachers, is the link on our website at the on the PARCC page to the PARCC released items. And a number of these items, these are actually the equivalent of a full-length test in each grade and subject, actual test questions that were administered last spring. And the reason I point people to them is there's a series of those questions where they actually released not only the question, but also the rubric that was used to score the responses, and then sample student work at each level. And so it allows you to see the fourth grade math example that we use today is actually one of those questions. You can see a number of students who got full credit on that question and approached the problem in different ways. You can also see some students who got partial credit, and you get a sense of sort of where they were getting stuck or what parts they missed. And then you see some students who weren't able to get any credit on that question and sort of where they might have gotten off track as well. And I think it really helps teachers get a clear sense of, oh, if I tried this question with my students today, they might be at this level, but these are the kinds of things I need to help them learn to score at a higher level in the future and to really understand and demonstrate these skills.
And I guess it's a follow-up, but there's always this inclination to teach to the test. Are you confident that teaching to the test, the PARCC test, basically, will elevate students' ability to do that? Or will we kind of get in the same conundrum as we are now, where we're teaching to DC CAS? We were teaching to DC CAS, and we saw not significant improvement, or we saw something that we wouldn't call improvement. And I mean, I guess it's a matter of your confidence in the PARCC as a real serious measure of really moving our students, not just moving our students, but our students and our teachers toward the levels of success that we're looking for.
I do think when you look at the tasks that were released, and in particular these performance-based tasks, the essays for the ELA test, the constructed response questions on the math test, that they really are they are items that require a significant level of conceptual knowledge and problem solving and critical thinking, as well as being able to explain and articulate your work. And I think that when you see the kinds of student work that are scoring at very high levels, it shows you the level of knowledge that they are really demonstrating. So I do think it's a very different thing than the old style test questions.
Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobson. This has been a very interesting conversation. And I wasn't on the board when the Common Core was adopted by the board. However, I do realize, being an ex-teacher, that this is a fundamental shift in the way teachers teach. And I've also been participating in many OSCE professional development programs. And I don't know how to say it. Okay. In the past, those professional developments were 8 hours in the classroom, but no transition to 8 hours at OSCE, but no transition to the classroom. In those lower performing schools, I think there needs to be some type of follow-up with the teachers and the administrators to help them administer the principles of the Common Core to teach them in their classrooms. I've seen firsthand that it's one thing to know, but it's another thing to apply and to change old habits. especially with younger children. And I think our greatest chance of success is with our 3 and 4-year-olds, bringing them up, even though we want to remediate those that are now in high school. So is it possible for those schools who are underperforming, because you have the results by school, that there could be some more professional development around implementing the Common Core curriculum?
Yes, it's been interesting, actually. Our training team on within the Division of Elementary, Secondary, and Specialized Education, they've seen an uptick in requests coming from schools for additional training and support after the PARCC results came out. So I think there are already people reaching out to us, which is great, and we are excited to work with them. I think also our teams are thinking about, we've got 2 big conferences coming up in February. The same Division of Elementary, Secondary, and Specialized Education is having another one of their LEA institutes, and it will be focused on instruction in each of these areas and how to best meet the needs of all students. And then we also, our Division of Post-Secondary and Career Education is also holding a major conference. And I had a chance to present to a number of their key stakeholders who are often college access providers, and talk to them about what these results might mean for their work, not just our schools, but also our nonprofit organizations, our groups that work with our high school students as they are applying to college, considering college, tutoring programs and mentoring programs, and how we can all think about better supporting our students in this way. But I completely agree with you on sort of the need to help people apply this different style of instruction.
I would just suggest that it's not just a seminar or a classroom, but they actually have mentors in their classrooms working with them.
Yeah, and I think LEAs see this need as well. And I think, you know, when DCPS rolled out the Cornerstones projects this year, I think a lot of it was based on this need to help people not just say we need to give kids the chance to also apply their knowledge, but we need to develop the kinds of projects that show teachers what that looks like and have those across every grade and subject area. So I think the LEAs also see this need and are working on it as well.
Ms. Wattenberg, you had another question?
Yeah, and I'll be quick. So one, I just wanted to reiterate that on the one hand, as you have said, the low scores don't suggest a downturn. It's a new test, but it does suggest a huge, huge problem, which you've acknowledged. And I also want to note, as Joe mentioned, the NAEP, while it has gone up on average, it has barely moved in terms of our lowest achieving students, and that's for 8 or 10 years. So I think it's really important to realize that just things aren't moving, and we really need to, as Mr. Pullman said, we need to find a way